Hi everyone and welcome to Spiritist Things. My name is Steve and I'm here with my friends
Scott,
Manny?
Juan.
All right. And today we're continuing our discussion about the Spirits book in the introduction under the explanatory notes under the 33 Fundamentals of Spiritism. And we are on item 6.
And it says, spirits temporarily assume a perishable physical body, the death of which restores them to liberty.
Liberty sounds interesting. Sounds like a freedom, right? So we learned that we have less dense bodies, so there's a liberty associated with that. Sounds like also we're learning additional movement, being free from this particular body. So there's freedom in movement, there's freedom in other things then, so thought, freedom in activity. So the liberties feels like a true relief, if you will, and you kind of connect those dots to some things. But it's interesting how we're so focused here on our physical world and the world we live in here in this incarnation that we forget that our body will end. And we'll have those freedoms and those liberties. And so it's interesting that what if we took ourselves as we live our life and look forward with the hope, right, and the freedom of our future and the love and the hope in our future and the liberties in our future, instead of always the day-to-day activity of our body and our the mass and the density of this. How could that change our view about what we do and how we do it? Interesting.
So it says we as spirits assume a perishable physical body. So, to start with that, how do you think that is? How do you think that happens? How do you explain that?
Well, it starts with two cells. You have, the one from the dad and the one from the mom. And they sort of come together and they multiply. So, that's a pretty deep topic. I don't know if the spirit enters but it that's from what I understand, from what I've read and from what I've heard, is it happens like cell by cell. The spirit is joined with the physical body, and yeah, that's a good topic about the liberation too, because they say it's like the spirit has all these senses and all these faculties, and the spirit, it's not like the spirit just came out of nowhere. It's like the spirit has been through many incarnations, many lifetimes. So the spirit has all his experience, but we get this temporary amnesia when we're reborn, and it's kind of funny. It's like, well, why don't they just why can't we just remember what happened before? Why can't we just recall all that? And they say it's like if we were born with the knowledge of this wonderful existence awaiting us at death, we might just live an idle life and do nothing, or just wish for death. But it's we can't forget that we have this opportunity here to work and to grow. And it's
also in a way it's we're blessed by the forgetfulness of what we've done in the past, because it can be a heavy weight to bear, knowing all the things you've done in your past lives. And an example that I like to use is that even in this one single life, people have done things that they deeply regret, and they can't even move past a single mistake they've made in this one single life. Imagine you have to live with knowing every single mistake that you've made in all your lives. I know personally that would be debilitating to me. I wouldn't be able to live a fruitful or a wholesome life. I'd be just dwelling on all these mistakes and just wondering how I could how I could have done them, and how do I get past it. So it is really a blessing to know that we come with a relatively clean slate. We keep some progress from the things that we've learned, but it's good that we don't have to know everything. And when we pass away, some of those thoughts do come back. A lot of them don't, but yeah, it's interesting too. It says that we get liberty when we pass away. So it's almost like when we're in this body, we're trapped in a sense. like you said, the spirit has many faculties, and some of those faculties, as as a physical human, we don't have access to.
What could be some examples of that?
Steve, you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, Andre Luis is always talking about. My favorite one is I think he calls it volition. When like they just sort of like fly wherever they want to go. They just like think of the place and they just like get there. Instead of having to like take to travel and walk and do the things, like they just go there. And it's like Alan Kardec. There's a chapter in the Spirits book, chapter or a question where he talks about like sleeping and dreaming, and he says like that's the time when we have like the emancipation of the spirit, and he uses that word emancipation. It's like another word for like freedom. Like it's like when we sleep, like the spirit has that temporary chance to separate, and it can actually like it's like a relief. It's actually like when our physical body like needs rest, it needs to like repair itself and do all these things when we sleep. But the spirit actually needs that rest too, because it's like it needs a break from the.
So could we understand that? Because I'm getting in my head a lot of questions with this. Could we understand that volition ability, it comes to every spirit just because we get rid of this physical body? Would it work like that? What do you think?
That's what it seems like. Yeah, it's
so
like,
every spirit just discarnates and may fly?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like how your thoughts travel almost instantly. When you're thinking about someone, maybe they're thinking about you at the same time. They might call you, or you might text them, and they say, "Hey, I was just thinking about you." So I guess when you pass away, and you're a spirit, then you think of someone, and then your spirit goes there. Like if you're thinking about your mom and she's still alive, or your child, then you think it, and you're there. It's the kind of the same way thoughts work.
Does everyone have the ability instantly to do that?
Oh, that's a good question. As a spirit?
I mean, what I meant is, does it come automatically just for the fact that we lose the physical body? So it says here that the death of the physical body restores the spirit to liberty. But, is that like without limitations, or are there still limitations?
Of course, let's talk about affinity for a second, right? So there's your limitations. So if you're vibrating at a certain level, you're going to congregate to those at a similar level of evolution, if you will. So let's say your grandmother, for example, was more elevated than you are. So effectively, you wouldn't be living in the same neighborhood, once you got into your city and so forth. And there's a good chance that you wouldn't be able to visit her in her elevated city, because you yourself are not prepared as a spirit, vibrationally, emotionally, mentally, morally. So there's many more lessons for you to learn, and a number of other things. So again, limitations imposed on the affinity of who you are and where you land, right? Where you live, for example. And the things you need to focus on in your own life. One of those things might not be visiting your grandmother. She might be in a sphere that's beyond your capability of reaching at that moment in time, based on your moral development. So again, we have that, and we've learned that through Spiritism, that's how that works. And there's, so mentally we can go places. But again, movement of yourself, through it, from one sphere to another, there's a vibrational property and affinity. It's kind of like, if you don't fit, you can't go, if you will.
It's funny because you talk about like your grandmother, and I mean, I'm not joking. Like my grandmother actually is in a rest home right now, and she's like completely, like she has dementia, and she's so far gone now, like that she can't even really talk to anybody or do anything. But the last time I saw her, like it was kind of funny, like her not remembering stuff, and now it's like it's not funny at all because she can't even take care of herself or do anything. But I've been thinking about this topic in regards to her because being Spiritist and studying, it makes you reconsider things, and I think about like she's my grandmother, Marion Campbell, is actually a spirit in that body, as Marion, as they say. And and her spirit has all those faculties. Her spirit has the memory of her life and her lives, of what she's done, has all these memories, has all these, experiences and values and everything that the spirit, brings with it. And it must be like painful to be in that body now, like, and be so limited, like, because of the physical organs are just not allowing her to, like, express, like, anything really. And to think, I mean, it's sad to talk about it, but it's a part of life, I guess, and it's interesting. Like, it's like, why do we start out as like little babies that, like, just need to be taken care of and protected and nurtured, and then we grow into adults and we learn to take care of ourselves, sometimes, and then we maybe we have children and we take care of them, and then as we get older, like, we get back to that part where we need to be taken care of again. It's just like,
I think that's a very good example of what we're discussing today. And a similar one that made me think about it is kids with autism. And I read about this kid that, as many other autistic kids, she couldn't communicate with their parents. And it was like, as it typically is, it was a very frustrating process where the kid would get mad when trying to express something because she couldn't really express anything. Then at some point, I don't know the age exactly, but I think it was around maybe 10, 11 years old, somehow she got kind of like an iPad, and she learned to type in, and this is on YouTube, so you can see the story. And she could, through that, she could communicate, and then it was like fully functioning person in the messages and in everything that she was saying to the parents. So now they can have a true communication, and she's even putting this out for trying to help others. But what I mean is, this is to me a clear example. Maybe it's extreme so that we can understand what it really means. It's a clear example of how this physical envelope is limiting that spirit. Like in the case of your grandma, you may go to visit her, you may think that apparently she's not able to communicate or to even be aware that you're there visiting her, but she may as well be, and it's just a physical limitation.
Yeah, they used to think the same thing about deaf children too. Like, oh, they're just stupid, they can't communicate, but really they had the same intelligence as a normal person. They just needed a different way to communicate, so that's why they invented sign language. And they were able to communicate just like any other child. They just didn't have the ability to hear or the ability to speak.
I remember, actually, this is like a weird memory of mine, being about like 2 years old, and I was really little. I was actually like looking at my mother, and in my mind I was thinking, like, I want to ask her for something. And I actually was thinking like a very clear, like, lucid thought in my mind, and physically I was unable to actually say like what I was thinking, like, because I could only say like one syllable. I couldn't say it. And I remember that. It's like a really clear, like, vivid memory of my childhood.
Wow.
And thinking like, and as I've been like studying, I started to think like, wow, okay, like maybe I had all that memory and all that knowledge, and and here I am, like, I can't express myself. It's very like, it's pretty weird.
Wow.
I don't know if you guys can remember back that far.
I can.
'Cause I can remember like some things, like from really being really young, like I remember like I was so little, like I was being held by by my grandfather, so.
Yeah, some people say that they have really like vivid memories about their childhood, but I can't remember anything.
Yeah, just a
about my
few.
childhood.
Yeah, just a few, not like the whole thing, right? But there's a few things I can still.
Until I'm like 8 years old, everything's a blank.
Well, my whole 20s is a blur.
Yeah, pretty much same thing for me.
Yeah.
What about we can talk about the perishable body. So I think we may have, touched this before. Clearly, through Spiritism, we understand that. So we want to take a minute just to talk about why is it that we have it, and why do we get reincarnated? So why are we imposed in these limitations, in this dense body, in this physical world? What's the core purpose? So again, that's a valid question. I think we can go there pretty quickly.
I think in one hand, we know a lot of things, and there's a lot of information out there, and even not just from Spiritism, which we do have a lot of sources to go, but even from other cultures and other traditions, and many of them, they bring a similar message, which is we need to evolve, we need to learn, we need to experience, we need to go through those experiences, and in that sense, this body and the environment and the things that happen to us, all of those are there in a particular way so that we can go through those experiences and we can learn. So if I have a particular kind of body with maybe a particular inclination to have certain illnesses maybe, or conditions, or abilities, or that's all there so that I can go through the experiences that I'm supposed to go, and then will help my spirit learn and evolve through that experience. That's a little bit how I understand it.
Yeah. Another important limit is lifespan, and a good way to look at it is, you look at people who are in Congress, or people who are like presidents, not necessarily in the United States, where presidents have relatively short terms, but for a member of Congress, they could be in Congress for their entire life, or a judge could be a judge for their entire life. And if you think, well, if we had a longer lifespan or an eternal lifespan, then you'd have a person with the same mentality in a position of power for an extended period of time, and what you need is like a recycling of thoughts and ideals and different perspectives. So a lifespan, your soul is eternal, obviously. So lifespan is another important limitation that is put on us on this earth, or in the universe.
Yeah, and I like that, because so we're learning here, and we're learning there, and we're learning everywhere. But again, as some would say that there's an accelerated learning here, because then we have this whole emotion, then we have this pain and suffering that we put ourselves through, and that's a part of it becomes a drive, like your spirit knows what you're trying to accomplish without not necessarily telling you. So it has its own drive, it's that drive, helping you make good choices. And again, there's a contrast that you see in your own choices. If they're not so well, you get to see, feel, touch, and emotionally, engage in those choices. But again, the contrast with your fellow beings on the planet, right? That's your learning lesson. So again, part of your life stream, being exposed to these experiences, great word for this. What you're supposed to collect. What your life stream under the grand plan, and you're in reincarnation, is these are the things you're going to be exposed to. So go off and do well and make good decisions. So those experiences are key. You can't experience that without interacting with others, and I'm probably in a certain way, limiting and having you focus in on a certain controls in your life. If you're free to do anything, anywhere, anytime, who's to say you would go down a path to learn those other experiences? So this body is imposed, right? The limitations, the lifespan, the people, the culture, the type of body, male, female, place, culture, language, part of the world. All of these play into the experiences that you're trying to collect, achieve, learn, to evolve at that time. So it's so powerful. And here, we talk about it like this. It's probably that's probably just a minuscule part of the piece, but we understand the value in that sense. Then we can learn to appreciate. Then we can learn humility. Then we can learn to learn from our mistakes.
You guys think we choose this body, or Did someone else chooses it for us, and if so, who? Or is it random? Or what do you think about that?
I think I would have chose a different one if it really.
You messed up.
That was the question behind the question. Okay, when I asked that.
Yeah, I think in part you have to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe. You know, it's like I say that joking around because it's like, okay, there's certain features that I don't really appreciate, you know, that I can or can't change, or I have trouble changing, you know.
I've already told you before, you're a solid 5.
Well, and I've thought about sometimes that, like, maybe there's some features of my body that I would have changed, like, but maybe like my spirit, and when I was working with the mentors, was like, it's like, oh yeah, you need to do this because you need to go through that, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. But like, it's like sometimes I'll go to bed at night and I'll be like, you know, I'm gonna wake up in the morning at like 5 a.m. and I'm gonna run like 3 miles and I'll start my day. Well, because I've done it before and it worked out, but it's like lately, it's like when I plan to do that and my alarm goes off at 5, I just hit the snooze button, you know. So it's like I make great plans and then I don't really stick to them a lot. So maybe that was what happened with with this, you know. I mean, I'm doing okay, but I could be doing a little better, you know. I could be honest about that.
Well, if you get back to the planning, we understand through Spiritism that there's a planning process, and you cooperate in the process. Doesn't mean you get to make all the decisions in the process. But you know, and let's talk about that for a second. So depending on how elevated you are, you know, maybe you get to make more of the decisions about some of the things you're trying to accomplish, because you're at a point where your goals would probably be more morally based and not physically based, of your looks and these kind of things anyway. But then if you're really at the other end of the spectrum, where you're not a nice person, you're evil even, then there's a point where you would have less or even no cooperation or choice, and things can literally be imposed on you so you can learn through. And you see these happening in reincarnations with people with affliction and some of the blindness. You know, it's because of how you conducted your life prior.
I think that too, like when it says the spirit inhabits a temporary physical body, like if you read sort of like between the lines, what it's really saying is that the spirit came first and the body came second. And I think even a lot of spiritual people don't really consider that. Like they might think like there's an afterlife, but they forget that there was a before life. You know,
Nice.
that you know, and it's like that's kind of like what it's saying is like the spirit was first, then the body came, and then this, you know, the spirit will come again. You know, and that's important because it's like, okay, what we always kind of say, like, well, what came first, and when was the soul created, and when did life start? Because there's all these great, like, you know, topics, like contentious debates, you know, about when does life begin, you know, and it's like, okay, well, life actually began an eternity ago, you know, and we're just like, we're just trying to figure it out, you know.
Right. You know, that's a great point too, and also, you know, your spirit experiences things outside the physical body too. So before you were in this physical body, you know, as a spirit, you had many experiences and learning experiences, and when you pass away and become a spirit again, you're going to continue to learn and continue to grow, and you know, you're going to have other things, you know, that you're going to be doing in the spiritual world. But people forget about that too. They think, you know, they're going to go to the afterlife, but they don't really, you know, think you're going to still be working and learning. And
What is this afterlife? Because it's still the same life. So this word can get very confusing to people. You know, there's a before life. They mentioned there's the now life, and then there's an afterlife, but there's just life. So my life stream continues, but I take on different identities in the physical world, if you will, bodies.
You should probably say there is an after this life, or, you know.
That could work.
After incarnation.
Yeah, after this incarnation, but, you know, after.
Like, and I just try, I think I said afterlife because I'm just trying to say like what people, like what you hear a lot, like a colloquialism, if you will.
I like it. I like the fact that you're talking, people could get a word out there before life and it turned into something. People would start scratching their head. That would be interesting.
Yeah, talking a language that people can understand. Because we sit here talking about incarnation and reincarnation and discarnation. It's like, okay, discarnation is dying. You know,
right?
Say like,
but it's not. It's moving to something with more liberty and more freedom.
And that's why death isn't really death. There really is no death. Like there's only rebirth again.
I was thinking, I don't know if it applies, but I was thinking about an experience that I had. Let's call it that. And it was an experience that I had with a bicycle. And I had this bicycle for about like 3-4 years before it got stolen, so I didn't have it anymore. So this is a particular bicycle that I really liked, a road bike, and I could, go out on the weekends and do road, and I had a great experience with the bike. Before that one, I had other bikes, and I learned how to ride with a small bike when I was a child, and all of that. And now I don't have it. And hopefully, my mind is I will have another bike at some point. But what I want to say is that was temporary, and it was temporary within a chain of experiences that I had. That some I like better, some I like less. But then after it got stolen, I had mixed feelings, and part of the feelings were, wow, I'm so happy that I had that particular bike because it made so many good weekends and so many good rides and so many good experiences. And in the other hand, that there were things, sometimes in the back of my mind, I did want a better bike or a different bike or different wheels or, so it just made me think it may be an analogy of, what we're talking about.
Don't you ride a Vespa now?
Yeah.
It's in the shop. He's not
so
happy
you-
about that either.
Busted.
You still have a bike.
Busted. Yeah, it's not the same.
I bet it gets great gas mileage though.
So let's talk about how we have this temporary body, and while we're in it, we're here doing the things that we need to be doing with the limitations and the contrast and interaction with other people to help us grow. And understanding the liberties that we have on the other side. So morally, if we could get past, the body and get past the limitation, knowing that it's temporary. So the importance shouldn't be on the body. The importance shouldn't be on the body, so you appreciate what you have, right? Be grateful for what you have because it's a tool, it's a loan.
And
right?
do the best for the time.
So, make the best, like anything else, make the best
Make
of
the
it.
best.
But, if you come in knowing, right, here, you're going to get, 70 to 100 years if you're lucky, right, so to speak, or what have you, or unlucky, whichever way you want to look at it. And it's temporary, so make the best of it, enjoy it, appreciate it. And I like the fact that if you stop there for a second, you go, okay, so what should I be focused on then? Right? It's not the physical body, so what would it be? And so that can kind of get you moving into, the inner transformation, and again, the lessons you're learning and the experiences that you have for the lessons that you're learning, and for the hope for your future, the hope, right, for you doing you, learning you, the best you can be, and applying that to this world and everyone around you, so that the future, you're helping create, by the way you do act and speak. So it's kind of neat that if you start to understand the things that are being taught, it helps you learn where to put your focus while you're here in this incarnation. And clearly the body shouldn't be one of them. You love it and appreciate it, but it, move past the point that you wanted, bigger feet or run faster or whatever, a better bike, whatever it may be. And I think I like that from that perspective. And it's kind of what the body does for us, right? So imagine all the freedoms and the liberties we had before, and now we're limited. Why? Oh, it can help us focus in on the things we should be paying attention to, the things we should be collecting, the virtues we should, go back with. So I think that's a point that I like to apply for something like that.
Yeah, it's like they say, each one teach one, right? Each one of us, we have an opportunity to learn, and we should do what we can to pass it on to at least one other person, hopefully. And that's a great message. So thank you guys so much for being here and talking to me tonight, because I needed that. So thanks, Scott. Thanks, Manny.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kwan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching Discover Spiritism Network. Check us out on YouTube. And tell your friends. Act like you know, essay. And we'll see you next week. But honestly, like, how much gas mileage do you get out of that Vespa?
I don't know.
Like 55, 70 miles per gallon?
Yeah, I think it's about.
Does
60.
it have miles or does it have kilometers?
No, it's not a Vespa. It's a Chinese moped.
Oh, okay.
You know, moped.
So it has miles.